Well, that church there is All Saints, and this is the village of Thurleston in Leicestershire. And the reason I've come here is because I'm filming a much longer documentary video about Hugh Latimer, who is the bishop, one of the 3 Oxford martyrs, who was burned under Mary in the 1550s, and he was burned on the 16th of October 1555 with the former Bishop of London, Nicholas Ridley. But it all started here, and Latimer was the son of a yeoman farmer. So yeomen weren't poor tenant farmers, but they were kind of landowners. They weren't the gentry, but they had certain rights and privileges, and they had enough land and money and income to send a son to Cambridge to university. But that's where he would spend the next 25 years of his life. But he spent his first 19 years of life here in Thurleston on a farm, and in a way that's the thing that made him one of the great preachers. He wasn't a noble son. His upbringing was poured into his preaching. He was the voice of the Reformation, and he was the preacher who, under Edward VII, Edward VI, was preaching at St Paul's Cross and winning the hearts and minds of people, the people of London particularly, for the Reformation and the new way, which I would argue was actually a very, very old way of justification by faith, and the Anglican religion as properly understood. So, but he preached the Sermon on the Plough at St Paul's Cross, which was a famous sermon which uses his agricultural imagery in a very sort of rustic way, but also in a very Christ-like way as well. He obviously preached parables about farming and that kind of thing. And it's interesting, he was here for 19 years, so he didn't go off aged 11 or 12 like some did, some bright spark who was possibly the son of somebody much wealthier who could send them off to Cambridge much sooner. He was here in really formative years, and so he understood how people thought, how they spoke. And so when he preached like one of them. So although he became very establishment over the next 20 years in Cambridge, he refers to himself as the most obstinate papist in England. He becomes one of the university preachers, but he has this experience meeting Bilney, who shows him the Gospels and how he can be free from the guilt of sin that Latimer was clearly feeling. He said he was very scrupulous about doing the Mass because he wanted to make sure it was effective. He was concerned for his own soul, and that the established old faith that he believed in didn't really quite deal with that. So this farmer's son, as it were, and I'm a farmer's son, and I work with words, and I do public speaking, and I'm a stand-up theologian, and I do lots of things like that. I can kind of relate to that story, and I don't think your upbringing ever quite leaves you alone. So that's what I'm thinking about with Bishop Hugh Latimer. He ends up preaching in London, but he's given a parish out in Wiltshire, which is not far away from where I live, and then he's made the Bishop of Worcester. And although under Henry's later reign, he has to sort of hand that back because everything swings back towards Catholicism, and he's kind of moved away from quite a lot of those teachings by that point. He then lies low for 6 years and then goes back to London 1546 for reasons we're not entirely sure about. But he's then arrested and kept in the Tower of London. And it's only really the fact that the king actually quite likes him, and he's got a few friends in high places, including Thomas Cranmer, who he knew at Cambridge, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury. He was able to stay alive until Henry VIII died, and his son Edward VI came to the throne, Josiah, the boy king, who was the great reformer. And that's when Latimer was in his pomp, preaching the Sermon on the Plough in January 1548, I think. And he keeps coming back to that theme as well. And so the people of London, who were obviously a bit more sophisticated and artisanal, they weren't agricultural, but London wasn't that big, and it still had links to farms and the rural, bucolic life. So they understood what Latimer was talking about. But he was a very effective preacher. But I wonder if the irony is the fact that, although his preaching was very effective and memorable, the thing for which he's most remembered is a non-sermon he gives at his death, where he goes to die in Oxford, just outside Balliol College, and he makes a joke to Ridley, who is being burned with him, and says, "Be of good cheer, Master Ridley, and play the man, for today they shall light such a candle in England as will never be put out," or words to that effect. So I always enjoy the insouciant wit of that moment, and he's not afraid to die. What's interesting with Latimer is that virtually everyone he's been friends with has been executed, pretty much, and the only one left is Cranmer, and he'll be dispatched fairly soon after Latimer. And I think he realised it was his time. And so he's known and celebrated, not really for his sermons, which were very well known at the time and sort of subsequently, but because he died so well. And ultimately, preaching's all very well, and I believe words are effective and are the source code of the universe. That's something I say quite a lot at the moment. But ultimately, you might talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? And that's what happens in Balliol, just outside Balliol College in Oxford. They couldn't burn him in London because there probably would have been riots, because the people who had heard his preaching probably wouldn't have put up with one of their heroes, one of their preachers being burned in that way. And so that's where this story ends. The story that starts here in that church, where a young Latimer has been baptised and brought up in the faith. Probably somewhere around here he might have even practiced his archery, because people still did archery in the late 15th century, 1485, when he was born. That's the date of the Battle of Bosworth, and there were archers on the field of that battle when Henry VII took over the crown from Richard III. It all starts here, then it goes to Cambridge. He used to come back here, I believe, to visit family. I don't think he was ashamed of his upbringing at all, quite the opposite. But he preached in a very earthy way in Cambridge and then in London, and his career in Worcester, but actually I think it's right at the end when he is the most effective in that little tiny phrase about lighting a candle that shall never be put out. Anyway, we're still a Protestant country. I don't know for how much longer we are going to be Protestant, but I think it's all coming back, actually, and I'm really pleased to be telling these stories about England, because Latimer was an Englishman, and I think all these stories make us partly what we are today. Anyway, I just thought I'd make a little video to talk about Latimer at his birthplace. There's a much longer video coming, which I'm really excited to be sharing with you. I've just been in Cambridge earlier today doing some extra filming, so hopefully you can see some nice shots of all that. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you next time.